the Zapruder Film. On November 22, 1963, Abraham Zapruder stood on a concrete pedestal in Dealey Plaza, Dallas, with his Bell & Howell home movie camera, waiting to film President John F. Kennedy's motorcade. What he captured in the next 26 seconds became the most analyzed piece of film footage in history, and it was immediately seized and hidden from public view for over a decade. Zapruder, a 58-year-old clothing manufacturer, almost didn't bring his camera that day. His secretary convinced him to go home and get it. He positioned himself on a pedestal near the grassy knoll to get a clear view. When Kennedy's limousine passed, Zapruder kept filming even as shots rang out. His camera captured the assassination in horrifying detail. Kennedy clutching his throat after the first shot, the fatal headshot, Jackie Kennedy climbing onto the trunk of the car, Secret Service agent Clint Hill jumping aboard. Within hours of the shooting, Zapruder was located by authorities. Secret Service agents came to his office that afternoon. The film was developed that evening at the Dallas Morning News facilities. Zapruder watched his footage and was reportedly traumatized by what he'd captured, particularly the graphic headshot. By the next morning, representatives from Life magazine were negotiating for the rights. Life purchased the film for $150,000, equivalent to over $1.5 million today, an astronomical sum for home movie footage. But Life didn't buy the film to publish it. They bought it to control it. Life published some still frames from the film, but never showed the motion picture to the public. The frame showing the moment of the fatal headshot, frame 316, was never published. The film remained locked in Life's vault for years. Most Americans never saw the actual assassination footage, only reading descriptions or seeing select still images. What made this suppression particularly significant was what the film showed. The official story, supported by the Warren Commission, was that Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots from behind Kennedy from the Texas School Book Depository. But Zapruder's film, when finally seen by the public, showed Kennedy's head snapping backward and to the left, suggesting a shot from the front, not the rear. This contradiction fueled decades of conspiracy theories. In 1969, prosecutor Jim Garrison subpoenaed the original film for his investigation into the assassination and showed it in court. This was the first time many people saw the actual motion picture. In 1975, the film was finally broadcast on national television on the show Good Night America. The public reaction was immediate and intense. Millions of Americans saw for the first time the graphic reality of their president's death. The question remains, why did Life magazine suppress this footage for so long? Was it simply about protecting their investment and maintaining decorum, or were they pressured by government agencies to keep the film from public view? Life claimed they withheld it out of respect for the Kennedy family and because it was too graphic. Critics argued the suppression was about controlling the narrative and preventing questions about the official story. In 1999, the federal government purchased the film from the Zapruder family for $16 million, declaring it an assassination record that belonged in the National Archives. Today, the full film is available for anyone to view, but for 12 years after the assassination, the most important visual record of that day was kept locked away from the American people. The Nix and Muchmore Films. Abraham Zapruder wasn't the only person filming in Dealey Plaza on November 22, 1963. At least 2 other amateur filmmakers captured the Kennedy assassination from different angles, and their footage was also immediately confiscated by authorities, though it's less well known than Zapruder's film. Orville Nix stood on the opposite side of Elm Street from Zapruder, filming with his Keystone home movie camera. His angle showed the grassy knoll area clearly and captured the assassination from a different perspective. Marie Muchmore, standing near Nix, also filmed the shooting with her 8mm camera. Within days of the assassination, both Nix and Muchmore were contacted by the FBI. Their films were taken for analysis. The original films were never returned to the families. Nix received a copy of his film back, but it was a generation removed from the original, lower quality, and potentially edited. The Nix family spent decades trying to recover the original film. In 2013, Nix's granddaughter filed a lawsuit against the U.S. government, seeking the return of the original footage. The government claimed they didn't have it, that it had been lost somewhere in the chain of custody between the FBI, the Warren Commission, and the National Archives. How does the federal government lose crucial evidence in the most investigated murder in American history? The Nix family suspected the original was destroyed, or is being held in classified archives because it shows something the government doesn't want seen. The Muchmore film had a similar fate. It was confiscated, copied, and returned, but the original quality was degraded. When researchers analyzed what remained of these films, they noticed something interesting. Both the Nix and Muchmore films, shot from the south side of Elm Street, show smoke or mist in the area of the grassy knoll immediately after the shots, consistent with gun smoke from that location. In 1978, the House Select Committee on Acoustics analyzed audio recordings from Dealey Plaza and concluded there was a high probability that a fourth shot was fired from the grassy knoll, indicating a second shooter. The Nix and Muchmore films, which captured the grassy knoll area clearly, would be crucial evidence for this theory, but the original highest quality versions remain missing or classified. Beyond these known films, the FBI received reports of other footage shot in Dealey Plaza that day. Several people came forward in the weeks after the assassination, claiming they had filmed or photographed the motorcade. Some of these people were interviewed by the FBI, their materials confiscated, and then they disappeared from the historical record. We don't know how many other cameras were rolling in Dealey Plaza or what happened to all that footage. The Roswell debris footage. In July 1947, something crashed on a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico. The U.S. military initially issued a press release stating they had recovered a flying disc, then quickly retracted it, claiming it was a weather balloon. For decades, this was written off as Cold War hysteria. Then, in the 1990s, witnesses came forward claiming that crash site footage and photographs had been taken and immediately confiscated by military authorities. Lieutenant Walter Haut, the public information officer who issued the original flying disc press release, stated in a sworn affidavit, sealed until after his death in 2005, that he had personally seen the crashed craft and alien bodies at Roswell Army Airfield. He claimed extensive photography was done of the debris and the bodies. Multiple military photographers who were stationed at Roswell in 1947 later claimed they were ordered to photograph the crash site and the recovered materials. Sergeant Frederick Benthal stated he was flown to the crash site, took photographs of wreckage and foreign bodies, and then had all his negatives and prints immediately confiscated. He was told the film would be developed at Wright Field, later Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he never saw it again. He was also ordered never to speak about what he'd photographed. Another photographer, PFC Frederick A. Smith, gave similar testimony. He photographed strange metallic debris, saw bodies of small humanoid beings, and had all his work seized with orders to remain silent. The most famous piece of alleged Roswell footage is the Alien Autopsy film that surfaced in 1995, purporting to show military doctors examining an alien body from the Roswell crash. This footage was later proven to be a hoax created by British entrepreneur Ray Santilli. However, Santilli has maintained that he did see genuine footage which he purchased from a former military cameraman, and that when that footage proved too damaged to use, he recreated what he'd seen. Beyond the autopsy hoax, serious researchers have documented testimony from over a dozen military personnel who claim they either took photographs, processed film, or saw footage from Roswell, all of which was confiscated and classified. If these testimonies are true, extensive photographic documentation of the Roswell incident exists in classified military archives. In 1994, the Air Force released a report claiming the Roswell debris was from Project Mogul, a classified balloon program designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests. In 1997, they released another report claiming the alien bodies were actually crash test dummies from experiments in the 1950s, though this doesn't explain how test dummies from the 1950s could be confused with an incident from 1947. The question remains, if Roswell was simply a weather balloon or a mogul balloon, why would military photographers be ordered to document it? And why would that documentation be classified for over 75 years? Whatever crashed at Roswell, photographic evidence was taken and locked away, and it remains classified to this day. The Tsar Bomba full footage. On October 30th, 1961, the Soviet Union detonated the largest nuclear weapon ever tested, the Tsar Bomba, a 50-megaton thermonuclear bomb that produced an explosion so powerful it was visible from 1,000 kilometers away. The blast created a mushroom cloud that rose 64 kilometers into the stratosphere. Soviet military cameras documented the test from multiple angles, but the full, unedited footage has never been released to the public. The Soviet government produced a 40-minute documentary about the test, but it was heavily edited and classified. Only select footage was shown to Soviet leadership. The documentary wasn't declassified until 2020, when the Russian Atomic Energy Agency, Rosatom, released it on YouTube to commemorate the bomb's designer. But even this declassified footage is incomplete. Experts who have studied the film note obvious edits and missing segments. The full footage would have included camera angles showing the impact zone, the extent of destruction, radiation monitoring readings, and potentially footage of the testing personnel and facility. Most significantly, footage from cameras positioned to measure the thermal pulse and blast effects has never been released. The Tsar Bomba's thermal pulse was so powerful that it could have caused third-degree burns at a distance of 100 kilometers. The pressure wave circled the Earth 3 times. But visual documentation of these effects remains classified. Former Soviet scientists who worked on the nuclear program have stated that extensive film documentation was standard for all nuclear tests. Every test was filmed from multiple ground positions, aircraft, and when possible, from space. The Tsar Bomba, being the most powerful weapon ever detonated, would have been the most thoroughly documented test in history. Why would Russia continue to classify footage of a weapon test from over 60 years ago? Some analysts suggest the full footage would reveal the true destructive capacity of the weapon, which may have exceeded what was officially reported. Others believe the footage shows environmental damage that would be politically embarrassing, or reveals details about Soviet nuclear testing facilities that Russia still considers sensitive. The partial release in 2020 gave the world a glimpse of the most powerful man-made explosion in history, but the complete visual record remains locked in Russian military archives. The Challenger disaster, additional footage. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart 73 seconds after launch, killing all 7 crew members, including teacher Krista McAuliffe. The disaster was broadcast live on television, and the iconic image of the shuttle's breakup is seared into public memory. But what most people don't know is that extensive additional footage from ground cameras, tracking cameras, and onboard cameras was confiscated by NASA and has never been publicly released. NASA had dozens of cameras filming the launch from multiple angles: high-speed cameras, telephoto tracking cameras, cameras positioned at various points around Kennedy Space Center. The breakup was captured in extreme detail from angles the public has never seen. Most significantly, the Challenger carried onboard cameras in the crew cabin. These cameras were designed to record the astronauts during launch and the mission. After the shuttle broke apart, the crew cabin fell intact into the Atlantic Ocean. It was recovered by Navy divers along with the onboard recording equipment. NASA has never released the onboard footage or audio from the crew cabin. The official statement is that the recordings were too damaged by seawater to be recoverable. However, former NASA engineers and investigators have stated that at least some of the data was recovered and reviewed by the investigation team. Joseph Kerwin, the NASA physician who led the team examining the crew remains, wrote in his official report that the crew of the Challenger did not die in the explosion, and that the crew cabin remained pressurized and intact until it struck the ocean surface at over 200 Musis approximately 3 minutes after the breakup. This means the crew likely survived the initial explosion and may have remained conscious during the fall. If the onboard cameras were functioning during those 3 minutes, and there's no reason they wouldn't have been, that footage would show the crew's final moments. It would be the most horrific piece of footage in space program history. NASA has stated that even if such footage exists, it will never be released out of respect for the families. But beyond the crew cabin footage, questions remain about the other angles of the disaster. In 1993, several news organizations filed Freedom of Information Act requests for all Challenger footage. NASA released some additional angles but maintained that certain footage was too technical or showed proprietary information about shuttle systems. Critics argue that NASA is hiding footage that would reveal how much the agency knew about the O-ring problem before the launch, knowledge that might expose them to liability. The Rogers Commission, which investigated the disaster, found that NASA engineers had warned about O-ring failures in cold weather, but managers authorized the launch anyway. Whatever the reason, the complete visual record of the Challenger disaster, particularly any recovered crew cabin footage, remains sealed in NASA archives, classified indefinitely. The JFK Autopsy Photographs. When President Kennedy's body arrived at Bethesda Naval Hospital on the night of November 22, 1963, military photographers documented the entire autopsy. They took dozens of photographs from multiple angles, showing the president's wounds in explicit detail. These photographs are crucial evidence in determining the number of shots and the shooter's locations. But much of this photographic evidence has been suppressed, and what has been released raises more questions than answers. The official autopsy was conducted by military pathologists who had limited experience with gunshot wounds. The autopsy itself was chaotic. Military officials were present in the room, giving orders and restricting what the doctors could examine. Multiple witnesses later stated that photographs were being taken constantly throughout the procedure. Navy photographer John Stringer was the official photographer. He stated he took numerous photographs, including images of the brain after it was removed and sectioned. But when the photographs were finally released decades later, many that Stringer remembered taking were missing. Specifically, photographs of the brain sections, crucial for determining bullet trajectories, were not included in the official collection. Even more suspicious, several photographs in the official collection don't match Stringer's memory of what he photographed. He stated he used specific film and photographic techniques, but the released photos appear to have been taken with different film on different cameras. This has led to persistent allegations that some autopsy photographs were substituted, altered, or faked. In 1968, the Kennedy family donated the autopsy materials, including photographs, to the National Archives with the condition that they be sealed. Access was extremely limited. Only authorized government investigators could view them. It wasn't until the 1990s, following the JFK Records Act, that the photographs were released to the public, though even then, the most graphic images were withheld. The House Select Committee on Assassinations, which reviewed the photographs in the 1970s, noted discrepancies between the photographs and the written autopsy report. Some wounds described in the report weren't clearly visible in photos. Other photos showed damage that wasn't mentioned in the report. Most controversially, several people who were present at the autopsy, including medical personnel and Secret Service agents, later stated that the photographs they were shown didn't match what they remembered seeing on Kennedy's body. Specifically, they recalled a large wound in the back of the president's head, but the official photographs don't show this clearly. Dr. Robert McClelland, one of the Parkland Hospital doctors who tried to save Kennedy in Dallas, insisted until his death in 2019 that he clearly saw a massive exit wound in the rear of Kennedy's skull, indicating a shot from the front. But the official autopsy photographs show the back of the head largely intact, suggesting shots only from behind. Were the autopsy photographs altered? Were some photographs removed from the collection? Did someone substitute photographs from a different autopsy? These questions persist because key images remain classified or were allegedly lost, and the photographs that have been released contain anomalies that experts have never satisfactorily explained. Area 51 confiscated recordings. Area 51, the classified U.S. Air Force facility in Nevada, has been the subject of conspiracy theories for decades. While the government didn't officially acknowledge the base's existence until 2013, they've been aggressively confiscating photographs and footage of the facility since the 1950s. The perimeter of Area 51 is surrounded by cameras and sensors. Armed security contractors patrol the boundaries. But the airspace above is public, and the surrounding mountains provide vantage points. Over the years, countless people have attempted to photograph or film the base, and many have had their equipment confiscated. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, UFO researchers began regularly visiting the mountains overlooking Area 51 to film activity at the base. They documented unusual aircraft taking off and landing, later revealed to be classified projects like the F-117 stealth fighter and other black programs. According to multiple witnesses, security personnel would sometimes confiscate cameras from people on public land near the base. While legally questionable, it happened regularly. Photographers would be detained, their film or memory cards taken, and they'd be released with warnings about photographing classified facilities. In 1989, Bob Lazar came forward, claiming he'd worked at a facility near Area 51 on reverse engineering alien spacecraft. Whether or not his claims are true, Lazar's friend Gene Huff filmed an interview with him discussing his allegations. Huff also filmed what he claimed was one of the alien craft test flights from a distance. After the footage aired on Las Vegas television, both Lazar and Huff reported being harassed, and Huff claimed government agents attempted to confiscate all his Area 51-related footage, though he had already made copies. More recently, with the proliferation of drones, the military has had to adapt its confiscation strategies. Drones flown near Area 51 are jammed, shot down, or forcibly landed using electronic countermeasures. In several documented cases, drone operators who retrieved their equipment found the memory cards missing or data wiped. In 2019, the Storm Area 51 internet phenomenon brought thousands of people to the desert near the base. Security was massively increased. Multiple attendees reported having their phones confiscated temporarily after attempting to photograph the base from public land. While the phones were returned, the photos were reportedly deleted. The question is, what is the government so determined to hide? If Area 51 is simply a testing facility for classified aircraft, why the extreme measures to prevent any photography? The aggressive confiscation of footage and photographs over decades suggests that something at the facility is considered so sensitive that even distant grainy images from public land are unacceptable. Whatever is happening at Area 51, the visual evidence has been systematically confiscated for over 70 years and shows no signs of being declassified anytime soon. The Trinity nuclear test. On July 16, 1945, the United States detonated the first nuclear weapon in human history at the Trinity test site in New Mexico. The explosion was filmed by multiple cameras from various distances and angles, but the complete footage has never been fully released, and portions remain classified 80 years later. The Manhattan Project assigned multiple camera crews to document the test. High-speed cameras were positioned at different distances, some close enough to be destroyed by the blast. The goal was to capture every aspect of the explosion for scientific analysis: the initial flash, the formation of the fireball, the development of the mushroom cloud, the shockwave propagation, and the ground effects. Dozens of cameras captured the explosion from different angles. Some footage has been released over the decades, including the famous high-speed footage showing the expanding fireball. But according to researchers who've studied the Manhattan Project records, significant portions of the Trinity footage remain classified. Why would footage from a 1945 nuclear test still be classified in 2025? Nuclear weapons experts suggest several reasons. First, high-speed footage of the initial moments of a nuclear detonation reveals specific information about weapon design, how the explosive lenses work, how the nuclear reaction initiates, how energy propagates. This information could theoretically help a nation develop nuclear weapons. Second, some Trinity footage may show effects that the government doesn't want publicized. The test was conducted with minimal regard for safety or environmental impact. Fallout spread across New Mexico and beyond. Footage showing the full extent of contamination or health effects would be politically and legally problematic. Third, cameras were positioned inside the test structure to capture the moment of detonation from within. This footage, showing the nuclear core at the instant of explosion, is likely the most highly classified nuclear test film that exists. It provides a visual record of exactly how a nuclear weapon functions at the microsecond scale. In the 1970s and 1980s, as nuclear testing became more controversial, the Department of Energy released some Trinity footage to the public, but it was always carefully selected. Edited excerpts, The full, unedited film rolls have never been declassified. Researchers at the Los Alamos National Laboratory Archive have stated that hundreds of film rolls from Trinity and subsequent nuclear tests remain classified. The footage exists, carefully preserved in climate-controlled vaults, but access is restricted to personnel with appropriate security clearances and demonstrated need to know. The Trinity test changed human history, ushering in the atomic age. Yet the complete visual record of that moment, the birth of nuclear weapons, remains partially hidden, locked away in government archives deemed too sensitive for public viewing 8 decades after the fact. The Apollo 11 lost tapes. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon in July 1969, it was broadcast live to millions of people around the world. But what most people don't know is that the broadcast they saw was actually a degraded copy. The original high-quality footage was recorded on special tapes at 3 tracking stations around the world, and those tapes mysteriously disappeared. NASA used a special slow-scan television format to transmit video from the moon. This format produced much higher quality images than standard television, but it couldn't be broadcast directly. The slow-scan video was displayed on monitors at the tracking stations, and standard TV cameras filmed those monitors, a conversion that significantly degraded the image quality. This degraded version is what was broadcast to the world. But the original slow-scan transmissions were also recorded on magnetic tapes at the tracking stations in Australia, California, and Spain. These tapes contained the pristine, high-quality footage as it was transmitted from the lunar surface, far superior to what the public saw. In the years after Apollo 11, these original tapes were stored at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. But in 2006, when NASA started looking for them to create a restored version of the moonwalk for the 40th anniversary, they discovered the tapes were missing. An extensive search was conducted. NASA officials checked storage facilities, contacted former employees, searched records. The tapes couldn't be found. In 2009, NASA officials admitted the tapes were probably erased and reused in the late 1970s or early 1980s, a common practice when magnetic tape was expensive and storage space was limited. But this explanation raised serious questions. How does NASA lose the original footage of humanity's first steps on another world, arguably the most historically significant film in the space program's history? Critics have suggested that the tapes weren't accidentally erased, but were deliberately destroyed or hidden because they showed something NASA didn't want seen. Some conspiracy theorists claim the original tapes showed evidence that the moon landing was faked, inconsistencies in shadows, unusual reflections, or other anomalies that would be more visible in the high-quality footage. Others suggest the tapes might have captured something unexpected on the lunar surface that NASA wanted to suppress. NASA has consistently maintained that the tapes were simply erased and reused due to budgetary constraints and poor archival practices. In 2009, they released a partially restored version of the moonwalk created from the best available copies, but it's still based on the degraded broadcast footage, not the missing originals. The original Apollo 11 moonwalk tapes remain one of the greatest losses in the history of space exploration. Pristine footage of humanity's greatest achievement, gone forever or hidden away, depending on who you believe. The Columbia disaster additional footage. On February 1, 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated during re-entry, killing all 7 crew members. The disaster was captured by numerous cameras on the ground, as the shuttle broke apart over Texas. But much of this amateur footage was immediately confiscated by NASA and other government agencies, and most of it has never been publicly released. As Columbia passed over the southwestern United States during re-entry, hundreds of people looked up and saw the shuttle breaking apart, leaving multiple contrails across the sky. Many grabbed cameras and camcorders to document what they were seeing. Amateur astronomers with telescopes captured detailed footage. News helicopters filmed the debris falling. Within hours, NASA and the FBI began an aggressive campaign to collect all photographic and video evidence of the disaster. They made public appeals asking anyone who had filmed the breakup to turn over their footage to aid in the investigation. But what happened next troubled many who complied. People who submitted their footage reported that it was confiscated and never returned. Some received copies back, but the quality was degraded and portions were missing. Others never got their footage back at all, despite being promised their materials would be returned after analysis. The official explanation was that the footage was crucial evidence for the Columbia Accident Investigation Board. Investigators needed to analyze the debris patterns to determine exactly how the shuttle broke apart. But why wouldn't the footage be returned after the investigation concluded? And why is so much of it still unavailable to the public over 20 years later? Some of the confiscated footage reportedly showed details that weren't included in the official investigation report. Multiple witnesses claimed their videos clearly showed objects separating from Columbia before the main breakup, possibly indicating the damage began earlier in the re-entry than officially acknowledged. Other footage allegedly showed debris patterns that contradicted NASA's timeline of the disaster. The most controversial aspect involves footage that may have captured the initial moment of structural failure. The official investigation concluded that a hole in the wing's leading edge, caused by foam striking it during launch, allowed superheated air to enter the wing during re-entry, causing catastrophic failure. But some analysts who saw confiscated footage have suggested it shows the initial failure occurring in a different location or manner than officially reported. NASA released some footage from the disaster for the investigation report, but most of the amateur video and photographs collected from the public have never been made available. Freedom of Information Act requests have been denied, with NASA citing ongoing sensitivity and respect for the crew families. The complete visual record of the Columbia disaster exists somewhere in NASA archives, collected from hundreds of sources, analyzed in detail, but kept from public view, raising questions about what those images might reveal about the true sequence of events that led to the tragedy. These 10 cases represent a disturbing pattern: visual evidence that powerful institutions, governments, militaries, space agencies decided the public shouldn't see. Some footage was confiscated for national security reasons. Some was seized to protect institutional reputations. Some was taken to control narratives and suppress uncomfortable truths. What unites these cases is the question they raise: who decides what visual evidence the public is allowed to see? In many of these cases, the footage exists, preserved in classified archives, viewed only by investigators and officials with proper clearances. The public, meanwhile, must accept incomplete records and official explanations without being able to examine the evidence themselves. Some of this footage has been partially released after decades of legal battles and Freedom of Information Act requests. The Zapruder Film, suppressed for 12 years, is now freely available. Some nuclear test footage has been declassified, but much remains locked away: the missing Roswell documentation, the classified nuclear test films, the confiscated Columbia footage, the lost Apollo 11 tapes. The existence of this seized footage reminds us that the version of history we're shown is often incomplete, carefully edited, and controlled by those with power to confiscate cameras, classify evidence, and determine what truths are too dangerous or inconvenient for public knowledge. The cameras captured reality. But what we're allowed to see is another matter entirely.